Okay, so like I said, I'm from the IoT team. We do a lot about connectivity, and it all relates to getting digital data from things. And it's a topic that excites me personally. I've bought a house outside Munich. We're busy renovating it. I want to make it smart, connected, put digital, I want to know when the windows are open, when they close. I love it. I could sit up all night thinking about it. My wife doesn't understand it. She doesn't understand why I want to invest money on that. But she says, okay, you need to do it. But the question is, why does the business world get so excited about connecting things, putting digital into devices that are sitting out into the field? And I think we've started on this IT transformation in the 60s, and we've progressed. We've optimized productivity a hell of a lot. And we've reached a point where I think the real next level of productivity comes from digitizing the edge, connecting the edge, getting that data from the edge up into the cloud. And that, I believe, is one of the key things that really gets the business world so excited about all of these topics, IoT, digitalization, AI, and so on. So let's look at this transformation. A lot of people are talking about the next industrial revolution, but it started with the first wave of transformation, which, like I said, was probably in the 60s when IT came about. People started to automate sourcing, their resource planning, tools like CAD and so on, were started to be used by companies to start optimizing their processes, create more value, cut cost. And this drove up productivity. It took decades, and then there was a second wave of transformation that was really enabled by the internet. And it was also enabled by lower, cheaper connectivity, of course, because suddenly what you could do was not only use data from inside your company in your ERP system, but you could also connect to other companies, and you could start to share things like your supply chain data, optimize those processes. And you had things like customer relationship management come about. Those tools really enabled a next level of productivity that gave rise to things like just-in-time production. So you took a lot of cost out of companies. For example, if you're looking at the time it took to manufacture a car, that was significantly reduced by all these tools. And you no longer had a hell of a lot of iron stored that you had to pay for, that was binding a lot of capex. You were shifting that out of your company into the whole supply chain system, reducing the time of manufacture, improving your sourcing. So you really optimized a lot of your financial system that way. Now, we're getting to the point where we're starting this next wave of transformation, where we're putting IT into all the edge, into the devices, into things. We're connecting them. They've been smart. They've maybe had some sort of processing, but for the first time, we're using the intelligence that is in a device that's going out into the world or in your product, adding connectivity and getting all that data into your back end. So now those products are becoming an integral part of your company's value chain, and you can actually get data from them. Often people think about disruption, and it's not disruption. It's not about a lower cost solution that's coming in and some startup disrupting the incumbents. And that's why we talk about an industrial revolution. And economists define an industrial revolution as something that has the power to transform societies and economies. And this digital transformation that we're starting on at the moment is something that has that power. And it's fundamentally going to change the way we work as companies, the way we interact with the world around us, but also with our partners and suppliers and so on. And Also, one thing that's, we don't have that today, but by putting this IT, giving them the power to communicate, we're going to make that edge a lot more independent and autonomous than it is today. The challenges, we've heard it a little bit this morning already, of this transformation are going to be big. So how many of you have done an SAP installation or a Salesforce installation, Oracle IT system upgrade here in the room? Hands up. There must be more of you. Come on. I think everyone in this career has gone through one of those. Those things are painful, yeah? You know, you've got to, things don't work properly, your customers are complaining. If you do a digital transformation, it's even bigger than that. Because not only your IT system, it's the way your company works. It's the way you understand your product. It's the way you design your product. It's the way you engage with your customers, with your partners, with your suppliers. Everything changes. So it's not just an IT project. It's actually a way of rethinking your company, and you've got to go through a big change process to really get all the benefits out of that. But change is good. It opens up a lot of opportunity, business opportunity, opportunity for differentiation. And I think that's why you're all in the room here, because you're looking for that opportunity to differentiate and get some sort of competitive advantage versus your competitors. So if we, so like I said, I'm from the IoT team, and we see an evolution of devices, you know, and there were dumb devices, and then you put some sort of electronics into them, then you started adding connectivity so you could monitor what those devices were doing. And you started to collect, the first time that you started to collect some sort of data about the location of a device, where is it being operated, what conditions is it in, what's the environmental situation. The next step, so obviously you have some sensors out there, like weather sensors and various devices that just collect, like an electricity meter just collects data and sends it up. But very often you want to control that that device. You want to optimize. The next level is then optimizing it. So you've got algorithms in there. You want to maybe change data in there. You want to optimize the settings. You've got diagnostics that you're putting in there for predictive maintenance and repair. And I think the ultimate or the next level is autonomy, where these devices start to become autonomous. And we all think of autonomous vehicles, which is why I put the picture of an autonomous vehicle on there, so to speak. But I think it's not only that, it's all devices, when you give them that ability, they're connected to the internet. It's no longer about us telling that device what it's got to do, but it's about the device also self-discovering its environment and saying, hey, this is me, this is what I need, this is what I want, I've got this information, I can make it available, maybe even sell that information. So when we're looking at autonomous, I think that's where that whole Internet of Things and digital's got to go, is that these devices have a life of their own. You know, it's like when you and I get on the internet, it's not the internet that tells us what we should be doing with it, but it's us that go to the internet and say, okay, I want this information, here's some content that I want to put on it. And that's the same sort of thing that's eventually got to happen with devices and things that are sitting out in the field. Yeah, these are two pictures that I use a lot to explain a difference in my world between M2M and IoT, but also describes kind of the evolution of our world on the way from the classic dumb device to digital transformation to an open ecosystem. So for a lot of OEMs, like if we take the tractor, they've just used metal and some wires and stuff and built a machine that was a tractor. That was, for many years, the business that they were in. They started to add some electronics, make it flashing lights when something wasn't working properly. And the next level up was to put connectivity in there. And then you could have and put an SLA on your tractor, and you could maybe even sell it as a service, do some predictive maintenance. But they were still in the tractor business. And maybe they expanded their business to trailers and planters or harvesters and so on, but they were still in the classic agricultural farm machining business. And it's a good business. They optimize that a lot. And today, I would say probably 90% of my customers are in that space doing good money. And we're selling them a lot. We talk a lot about connect, secure, monetize. We sell them technology bricks that they can integrate into those machines. We have a lot of security solutions. And for them, and that's one of the major shifts that's got to happen, is they're still sitting in their silo of technology, their domain. And even when I think of my smart home, then it's, maybe I choose Samsung, or I choose a KNX system, or I choose this system. We're still all sitting in silos. And sure, APIs are helping a little bit, but it's still about putting data up in the cloud, somehow sharing through APIs, rather than the devices being in an open ecosystem. And monetize in the world, in this M2M world, it's still about cost optimizing my business. It's, when we first connected things, it was a standalone system. It would optimize one process. On the way to this one here, you're starting to optimize multiple processes, but you're still within your business. And it really gets exciting when you're going to IoT, where I think we're talking about open ecosystems. So for the first time, what we're doing is we're taking farm equipment system, we're networking it with weather data system, with the seed planting information, with irrigation systems, and suddenly you're breaking those silos, those boundaries. And the real value comes from doing that. And then suddenly you're no longer in the farming business, you're in the data business. So you've gone from selling tractors to harvesting data, if you so want. And you're going to be using a lot of these things that are hyped today, like machine learning, augmented reality, AI, cognitive computing, blockchain. All of that is helping drive ourselves to this future of IoT. And so like I said here, we were still looking at optimizing one process, optimizing two processes within one company. When we're looking at this world, it's starting to become the world of multi-sided business models. So multi-sided business model is like when I get on the internet and I type something to Google search engine, I'm not paying for that. There's advertising, other stuff happening, and that's a multi-sided business models. Multiple parties engaging. The money flows are not always clear to me when I'm using that system. And similarly here, in such an open environment, we're looking at multi-sided business models where maybe I'm using the weather system, but I'm maybe not even paying for it. Maybe they're getting some data in return. The whole way the revenue streams are flowing is changing a lot. And it's no longer about optimizing a process within one company. It's about it's going to affect multiple processes across multiple entities. And that's what makes it challenging, is to understand how those revenue flows work, how those processes work together, and I need to work with a whole ecosystem rather than just building a tractor and selling it to a farmer. So I recently came across this example of the connected tennis racket built by a company, Babolat. And I thought it was interesting because it often, at least for me, things that I use in a sort of consumer environment often make it easier to understand some of the challenges and the things that are happening. So I believe that connecting everything, making it digital, is going to change a lot of fundamental things on our business side, but it also requires our technology to evolve. And I like looking at this example because if you're Wilson manufacturing tennis rackets, and suddenly there's this company popping up that's manufacturing a connected tennis racket, that changes your business entirely. Is it still about the strength of the strings that are used on the tennis racket when you've got a connected tennis racket? I mean, the guy that's going to buy a connected tennis racket is going to be looking at his data on his iPhone. He's going to be networking with a community, and suddenly there's a whole community thing going. while Wilson's still trying to sell tennis rackets that have a certain strength and stability or whatever, which maybe in the connected tennis racket game is not really relevant. And suddenly you've got to think about data and stuff. On the tennis racket, you're integrating microelectronics and stuff maybe into your tennis racket, which if you're Wilson, you've never done that before. So it also means that suddenly you've got to go into programming applications. You've got to start building a community of tennis players. And it really changes for you as a business a lot of things. And in the next few slides, I wanted to look at a couple of those business strategy aspects that you have to look at and think about when you're doing a digital transformation. So, like I said, and I'm kind of using here, the Porter's 5 forces to look at and say, okay, there's things you need to think about when you do that, when you're going digital. For your buyers, it's interesting because in many cases you'll be switching from a capex intensive play to recurring revenue, and we've seen examples of the sort of subscription models, which is often very interesting for the buyers. It's interesting because for us as a company, using such digital data from those products creates a lot of opportunity for differentiation. If you think about the tennis racket, you're opening up a whole plethora of opportunity to interact and engage with your customer, add features, later add features when the customer's already bought the tennis racket and using it. That differentiation is unbelievable versus a simple classic tennis racket where you don't even see the strength of the strings. And typically you get, so this could be it's an advantage and a disadvantage, because by having all of this data that your device is suddenly producing, you're giving your customer transparency, which is great if you've got a great business and it really gives them value. But if you are trying to hide some of that value, it becomes visible to him that you are maybe charging too much for the value that he's getting. So you really have to understand where you're getting the value from and how you price it and sell it to your customer. If you look on the supply side, you're less dependent on the mechanical stuff. So maybe it's like it's less about the graphite. Suddenly it's all about IT, which on the other side also means that you have a greater dependence on your IT suppliers. That really becomes a core element, and without it, you may not be able to deliver your service to your customers. If you're looking at competition, like I had that slide earlier, you're no longer in the tractor business. You're suddenly in a whole system environment with ecosystem partners and so on, and the rivalry becomes a lot more difficult to see. We often talk about competition and other forms of doing business and interacting with your partners and ecosystem players. And often you've got the ability to shift the price or the rivalry away from price. So if you're looking like at the tennis racket again, a lot of it will focus on price, and you've got Sassinger and Wilson, whoever, they're probably competing on price. But how do you price a connected tennis racket? Where does that sit in relation to a classic tennis racket? I haven't gone to look at, I don't play tennis anymore, but I haven't looked at it yet. I don't know, is it cheaper, is it more expensive? And it's no longer about the price of the racket, it's about a whole community thing that you're putting up, and the way you're engaging with your customers, and you've got alternative revenue streams suddenly coming up. If we look at substitutes, then I think there's a lot of opportunity in this whole digital game for new entrants to come in. Like if we think about the electric vehicles as well, it's a good example of where suddenly you've got these digital things that are coming in, disrupting the market, opens up, and there's other drivers for that as well. But suddenly, it's still in the car, but suddenly it's enabling car sharing and new modes of transportation that was really changing the landscape there. And if you think about car sharing, that's typically one of the problems that we have here. It optimizes utilization of the vehicles, and at the end of the day, there's going to be less vehicles on the street, which creates a new problem. Or not. For us, it's good, yeah. But for the car OEMs, it's a bit of a challenge. Yeah, new entrants. Yeah, like the tennis racket guy. You're doing Wilson. You're looking at your competitors, your classic competitors, and suddenly there's this guy pops up. Never heard of him. Makes a connected tennis racket. It's and probably also for the classic OEM, it's a real challenge to suddenly enter that digital space where some startup is coming up, has got an idea, collects money on one of those funding platforms, and maybe he doesn't even know how to make a racket. He gets someone else. His expertise is the electronics and not manufacturing tennis rackets. So then you need to ask yourself a number of questions. Strategic questions when you're embarking on this route. And I think when it comes to operational effectiveness, you've got to get that cost down. Leadership and productivity, regardless of whether you're going digital or not, is key anyway. And a lot of the last years, like I said, we started in the 60s with IT. Most companies have really looked at the operational effectiveness a lot already. But I think with this whole, and obviously getting digital data out of your devices and connecting them gives you additional insight that you can use to fine-tune. But the key questions today will be around the strategic positioning. How do you deliver distinctive value and do things differently to your peers in this industry? And I think that's one of the key drivers why people are looking at digital transformation. How can I outperform my competition by doing something completely different? And then there's a number of questions that you need to ask yourself, like which data is really relevant for the productivity side, but the interesting ones are on the other side, like how do I evolve and change my business model? If we look at the tennis racket again, could I license a tennis racket? Could I license it by the game? Is that a potential business model? Is there a tennis racket sharing market? I don't know, maybe. What about my sales channels? Can I disintermediate them, like Tesla and Nespresso, go direct? Or is it purely an online sales channel suddenly? How much functionality do I embed in the product versus the cloud? Like if I take the tennis racket again, if I put enough processing in there, and maybe combine that with, thinking a bit wild here, but with augmented reality glasses, I could be selling a trainer on the field, on the tennis court. I could be hitting the ball, getting back data, seeing, okay, I'm holding the tennis racket wrong, I should be hitting it harder, I'm not hitting it at the right spot. Or is it data, do I put all of that up in the cloud and make it available after the game? Do I have an open or a closed system? Apple versus Google. Apple's a very, very closed system. Or do I go the path that Google's chosen, where I make a lot of things open, available? Do I sell data to outside parties? How do I make sure that my competitor is not going to use that data against me? So those are a lot of strategic questions that you need to ask yourself when you want to do a digital transformation, really get value out of your products. And then it entirely transforms the processes within your company, the way that you create value. You've got primary and supporting activities. That's the way most of us do our business. We've got most of these things running, and your product just become more complex. It's now part of the cloud. The shift from mechanical to IT means that your system engineering just suddenly got more interdisciplinary. They've got to do both software and hardware stuff. You can't ship your product when the cloud part's not working. Like a tractor, you could always, or maybe a tennis racket, yeah, you could always sell a tennis racket. You didn't need the cloud for it to work. But when you've got a connected tennis racket and the cloud's not working, the customer can't sign up and start using his tennis racket, maybe. So, and then software monetization is great because suddenly you can do one product and depending on the software you're enabling, have it do different things. You've got evergreen products that are never done. Like the Tesla, you buy a Tesla, you drive out onto the street. When I went to visit Tesla, they took me for a test drive. It was pretty cool. So I don't know, I haven't had the experience of them upselling stuff to me yet, but the way I understand it, you can buy an autopilot from them even, so after you've bought your car, you can't do that on on my BMW. And you can update those things. It doesn't have to be a Tesla, but you could update the software in your tennis racket when it's out in the field. So your products never get done. And some of these things could come, maybe your product eventually isn't even digital anymore. Like, I still remember phones that had a lot of buttons on it, and this one's only got 1 or 2 buttons. But maybe in future there's no telephone. If you've got your AI glasses, you can take a brick or you take your hands and you can project something on there and you start pushing buttons and doing things on your hand and the product's completely disintermediated. So going digital can really, really transform the way you're going to create value. You need to start thinking about your products. Or if you're designing products, car-sharing bicycles, they look ugly, don't they? They're built really heavy. Not like my road bike that weighs probably 8 kilos. Those things are really heavy. It's built for a completely different purpose and different market. So the design, the engineering, about how you need to build a product, you're getting data from the field that you can use to optimize your product. So all of that is changing. Quality control. How do you do quality control when you're still updating your product once you've shipped it out to the field? So the message here is that the connecting your products, making them digital, getting that digital data from the field into your business is really going to fundamentally change all of the processes within your company. It's not just a design question, it's a question across every part of your company. So I've talked a lot about business, got 2-3 minutes left, so let's talk a little bit about the technology behind that. And I come a little bit more from the communication side. And in the 60s, telephone calls, there was someone physically connecting the call. And back then, people were thinking we're going to run into an issue because if if everyone starts getting a telephone, then half the world would be working in the telco industry, which would have been great because then a lot of my colleagues would have been female, which I think would have been great. There would be a lot of women in technology, but unfortunately that didn't happen. We started to automate everything. Yeah, we took the process of connecting and we automated all of that, and that's how we achieved scalability. Then we started introducing the internet, and I like this slide because I was able to put women and Star Wars into one picture. So what we did with IoT and the way we're approaching it today is I believe is not really going to work in 10 years' time and really come to that vision of an open ecosystem where things interact. Today, what we did with IoT is we also started automating everything. The process of connecting a product, making decisions, everything from the device is going up into the cloud, and we're creating this Death Star kind of apparatus that has all the power. And we're automating that. Yeah, we're putting gateways, hubs, interfaces, middleware in between to try and make it all quicker, and still have some sort of dumb devices at the bottom. And I don't think that it's the way we should be building IoT architectures. And there's a couple of things and technology is going to change that as well. If we think about blockchain, blockchain's giving a product, a device that's sitting out in the field, the ability to become more autonomous. It doesn't have to go up to the cloud, get an okay to say, okay, I can make my data available, or I can make this transaction. I've executed this transaction here, cloud, okay, I've executed the transaction. With blockchain, the device can say, can interact with another device, and that transaction is written to the blockchain, and is there available for everyone to be seen. In 5G, like we talk a lot about 5G is one of those hype topics as well. We're talking about network function virtualization. We're shifting the intelligence from the central core out to the edge. And one of the reasons we're doing that, this world here was built around voice. And in the voice world, your brain processes that in 100 milliseconds. That's so 100 milliseconds when you're communicating at the speed of light is 10,000 kilometers, means your data center or your core equipment could be 5,000 kilometers away. The world of tomorrow is more visual, and your brain processes pictures in 1 millisecond. That means your data center can only be 50 to 100 kilometers away for visual stuff. So autonomous vehicles, if we want to get an operator to drive a vehicle from an operations center, if it's more than 50 kilometers away and he does that for too long, he starts to get nauseous, seasickness. Tactile internet, that sort of thing. That requires the data center to move out to the edge. And that's another example of where technology is going to evolve, move things, intelligence, closer to the edge. And this type of architecture where it's more the X-wing fighters rather than the intelligent X-wing fighters that are going out into the field is going to be most successful in the long term to enable those new architectures and really enable digital transformation. So there are some technical requirements that we need for this digital transformation, like shifting data analysis and automation closer to the edge, softwareization of the network to make it more flexible. For us, we need to embrace change. We need to understand our competitive landscape. We need to review our business strategy. We need to evolve our business processes if we really want to make use of this digital transformation to improve our business. So yeah, I'm inviting you to understand and embrace the transformation challenges, and together we can digitize everything if we like. Thank you.